Translation is another important term we need to define here. Joseph Smith used that term in a somewhat broader sense than we do today. The term that comes closest to what we think of as a translation is the translation of the Book of Mormon, where he had an ancient text in front of him and translated it into a modern language, English. He did a little bit differently with the Urim Thummim rather than a knowledge of the grammar and the textbook and dictionary and so on, but that comes closest to our concept of translation. The translation of the Bible proceeded totally differently. He simply had a text of the King James Version of the Bible in front of him, and through direct revelation obtained divine commentary and corrections and additions to that text in English without ever seeing the original documents. In D&C's section 7 is another example of a translation. Here is a translation of an ancient parchment done by John that Joseph Smith clearly did not have direct access to, but via revelation obtained a translation into modern English. So what kind of translation was the Book of Abraham? Which of those three does it fit into? Well, two possibilities occur to me. The middle possibility is not possible because he didn't have an English translation of the Book of Abraham, which had been corrected. So the first and the third are the two possible. A translation of an ancient text, just like the Book of Mormon, or a translation by direct revelation, like the parchment of John. Let's look at each of those. This seems to be supported, the idea of translation from an ancient text, by references in the diary of Joseph Smith to translating ancient Egyptian records and statements of some of his associates. And it is undeniably possible that a copy of the ancient Book of Abraham could have been somewhere on that papyrus. So to me, that's the most likely explanation. But I don't eliminate the possibility of the second one, although it doesn't feel as good to me. The idea that the Egyptian papyri simply stimulated Joseph Smith thinking about Joseph in Egypt and Abraham, and thus received by direct revelation. If you adopt that stance, then you have to assume that the statements in Abraham 1:12 and 14 referring to the illustrations are parenthetical remarks by Joseph Smith inserted into the actual text of Abraham. Either way, it works, but I prefer the first, and that's my own belief at this point. All right, that brings us to what I call the Facsimiles Problem. Facsimiles 1 and 3 that are now associated in the Book of Abraham with the Book of Abraham are the beginning and ending of the text of the Book of Breathings on this particular papyrus. Facsimile number 2 was totally elsewhere, had no relationship even with the Book of Breathings, but was a separate document. Why are they associated with this ancient pagan text when somehow there's a relationship with Abraham? The answer to me is simply that these illustrations ultimately derive through a 2,000-year period from illustrations done by Abraham, but have in that intervening period been adopted and adapted for other uses. What Joseph Smith simply did was to give the original interpretation of the illustrations as they had been done by Abraham, although they're in a very distorted form as they appear now. All right, key to that is there evidence then that anciently these illustrations were associated with Abraham? That's the real pivotal question, and the answer is yes. And this is really, to me, the bulk of the evidence that supports Joseph Smith's association of these things with the Book of Abraham. Let's start with facsimile number 1. An ancient Egyptian papyrus dating roughly to the 1st or 2nd century AD, so within a few hundred years of the Joseph Smith papyri, has a lion couch scene similar to that we find in the Book of Abraham. Let's look at that. And underneath there, in the circled portion, is the name Abraham. And it says Abraham, who upon, poepi, it's in Greek. And then the papyrus, as you can see, breaks off. The key point here is that an ancient Egyptian papyrus that Joseph Smith didn't know about associates this scene with Abraham. Let's put the two side by side. They're inverted there. And note there are some similarities and there's some differences. First of all, the person is not actually lying on the lion couch, right? They're on another bier, that's B-I-E-R, not E-E-R, behind the standing figure. But the general similarity is obvious, and again, the association with the name Abraham is pivotal. All right, let's turn to Facsimile 2. On your left is the church historian's copy in the church historian's office of the facsimile number 2, illustrating that apparently, at least when that drawing was made, that there was a considerable amount of damage. And in fact, the areas that are shown damaged are have text that has been taken from other papyri and placed into the drawing, which don't belong there and are upside down, and problems with it. So that helps to understand some of the seeming incongruities with the facsimile drawing as we now have it. All right. In an ancient Egyptian papyrus of roughly the 1st or 2nd century AD again, there is a phrase, Abraham, the pupil of the eye of the Wedjot. The Wedjot was the special eye of Osiris. Osiris was killed by his brother, chopped into pieces and thrown all over the earth. His wife's sister, Isis, gathered them all together and couldn't find the other eye. And so that eye was miraculously restored, and then he was resurrected. And so the eye, the Wedjot eye, the perfect whole eye, was symbolic of resurrection and eternal life. And there it says that Abraham was that Wedjot eye. In the 162nd chapter of the Book of the Dead, it contains the instructions for the making of what facsimile number 2 is, a hypocephalus. It indicates that it talks about the Wedjot eye and then says that that represents an eye. It is a pupil, is what it is. And that's one of the representations. And so here we have Abraham called the Wedjot eye, and the text that talks about making hypocephali associated with Abraham. In a pseudepigraphical text, texts are ancient texts that are of religious content that never made it into the Bible for various reasons, some of them fairly obvious when you look at the Gospel of Thomas, for example. At the end, Peter comes up to Christ and says, "Are women going to be in the celestial kingdom pointing at Mary?" And he says, "Don't worry, Peter, their sex is going to be changed, and we'll all be men, and everything will work out." Fairly obvious why that one didn't make it into the canon. But they clearly have some ancient roots that go back to traditions associated with the people that they claim to be talking about. Well, there's an ancient pseudepigraphical, oops. There we go. In this apocalypse of Abraham sees a vision. And in this vision, he describes what is in the heavens, on the earth, in the sea, and in the lower depths. In facsimile number 2, these words are found: "Almighty God, Lord of heaven and earth, and of the netherworld and his great waters." Very similar terminology. So we're finding even wording in these ancient texts associated with Abraham that are similar to wording found on this particular hypocephalus.